off of the olive tree. That's what Paul is referring to right now. Through unbelief and worshiping the Gentile gods, Baal and Beelzebub and all those satanic gods, that's how we were broken off. The branches were nipped off. Now let's go back to the account with Paul and finish breaking down what he's going through. Romans 11 verse 17. And if some of the branches be broken off, the sum of the branches, as we just read in Jeremiah, was the northern and southern kingdom, Israel and Judah, the two kingdoms that split. And thou being a wild olive tree, and thou, who's the thou? Thou, that's referring to the natural Gentiles. And thou, you Gentiles, being a wild olive tree, because Israel is a good olive tree. The 12 tribes of Israel is a good olive tree. But thou, you Gentiles, you're a wild olive tree. Were grafted in among them, and with them partakers of the root and fatness of the olive tree. And thou were grafted in amongst the good olive tree from the wild olive tree, and then partakers of the root and fatness, meaning the blessings, the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's going to be some Gentiles out there that are going to serve the Most High in righteousness and going to be partakers of the blessings that come with being in this good olive tree. There's going to be some Gentiles out there that do that. This is not talking about all Gentiles that are the wild olive tree. Some Gentiles are going to break off of that and come to the good olive tree and worship the Most High and exclude paganism, like the Christian church, the Christmas and Easter. They're going to exclude all that, and they're going to be partakers of the root and fatness. Romans 11 verse 24. For if thou were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, if thou, you Gentiles, natural Gentiles, were cut out of the wild olive tree, which is wild by nature, what does that mean? In the beginning, when you read in Deuteronomy 4 verse 16, the Most High took the nation of Israel out as an inheritance to worship him. But he took the Gentile nations and he gave you the sun, the stars, the moon, the dragons, snails, lizards, fowls of the air, monkeys. He gave you all that stuff to worship. That's what it tells you. He gave you all the host of heaven to worship. But he took the Israelites out to worship him. So you're naturally wild. It's natural for you Gentiles out there to teach paganism. It's natural. That's why it's calling you the wild branch by nature. You're the wild olive tree by nature. It's natural for you to worship Satan and worship paganism, or worship and do paganistic rituals. It's natural for you to do that. That's why when the Gentiles got grafted in, it didn't take nothing but 100, 200 years later after Christ for you to pervert the entire doctrine of Christianity, or the entire gospel and the entire word. It didn't take long for you, because it's natural for you to do that. That's what Paul is breaking down right now. And all the 90% of the comments I get about we don't have to keep no commandments, guess who it comes from? The Gentiles. Because I got to remember sometimes, you know what? They're the naturally wild branches. So it's natural for you to not want to keep any commandments. And it's natural for you to gravitate towards homosexuality and bestiality. It's natural for a lot of you guys to do that. And gay marriages. It's natural for you to do that and not keep none of God's commandments. So I have to remind myself sometimes when I see those. I rarely see Israelites, whether they know they're Israelites or not, come on the channel and say, we don't have to keep no commandments. I rarely see that. And were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, and you were grafted contrary to nature. Because the natural, like I said, naturally, your tendency is to go and worship Satan. The proof is in the pudding. Look at the Christian doctrine now, after the Gentiles taking it over. Now you're doing Christmas, you're doing Easter, you're doing Halloween, you're doing Sunday worship. You ain't keeping no commandments. You're doing everything that you used to do before you got grafted in. That's what the majority of the Gentiles out there are doing. You're doing all the same rituals that your forefathers did before you were grafted in. All you did was take the Bible and mask it over. That's all you did. Naturally, you're grafted in contrary to nature. That means the ones of you that get grafted in, you're going to have to cut off those ties. You're going to have to cut off all those dealings that your forefathers dealt with. All that pagan Christianity, all that Satan worship. You're going to have to cut all that out. And that's why it's going to be just as hard for the Gentiles to get into the kingdom as it is for the Israelites, because you're going to have to cut off what's natural to you. It's natural for you to deal with horoscopes and zodiac signs. It's natural for you to be dealing with that stuff. And looking in the stars and creating gods and stuff out of it, and Mother Nature and Father Time. That stuff is natural for you. You introduce that stuff to the world. So that's natural. So it's going to be hard for you to cut those ties off. You got to cut that off and come into the good branch, which means worshiping the Most High in righteousness, keeping His commandments, and having no other gods. That's going to be hard for a lot of Gentiles to do. Hard for a lot of Gentiles to do. How much more shall these, which be the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? Paul is saying, if the Most High took you out of the wild olive tree from worshiping Satan and Baal and all those other pagan deities, if He was able to graft you out of the wild olive tree and bring you into the good olive tree, how much more is He able to take the natural branches and bring them back and graft them in again? Meaning the Israelites are not going to be cut off and not be able to come back into their own olive tree, because we're the natural branches. We're the natural branches. So we can get grafted back into our own olive tree. See, it takes a lot more science and work to chop off a wild olive tree and graft it into a totally different olive tree. But the natural branches, we're able to come right back into our own fold with no problem. The Most High is accepting all Israelites that's willing to come back and repent, even though it's only going to be a remnant that shall be saved. A remnant of Israelites going to be saved. That's it. For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits. Paul says, don't be ignorant, you Gentiles, lest you be puffed up with pride. That's what he's telling the Gentiles, who's thinking that the Israelites just got cut off and now they're grafted in, and the Israelites can't come back into the fold. That blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Until the fullness of the Gentiles become into the fold. That's what it's referring to. Until the fullness, the designated amount of Gentiles come into the fold, because there's only a certain amount of slots on this olive tree. You have an olive tree there, and it's only a certain amount of slots on it. So you have Israelites that are broken off of it, because at one time the olive tree was only Israelites. That's all the olive tree was for. You have the whole olive tree with a certain amount of branches on it and a certain amount of slots or stems. So the Israelites were chopped off of the olive tree, and now there's a certain amount of slots that are left still. There's a certain amount of stems left on this olive tree. So there's a certain amount of stems to be filled. So the Most High is grafting in from the wild olive tree enough to be able to fulfill or fill in those gaps. Because there's only going to be a remnant of Israel that returns back to this olive tree. Only a remnant that's going to return back. And He's going to fill in the rest of the olive tree with the Gentiles, which are going to be servants and handmaids in the kingdom of heaven. That's what it's going to be. Going to be servants and handmaids in the kingdom of heaven. So by default, there's going to be more Gentiles than there is Israelites, because only a remnant of Israel is going to be saved. And it tells you in Amos the 9th chapter, only a remnant, there's going to be a remnant of Edomites that make it, and there's going to be an amount of the other nations that make it as well. But the Edomites, who are the so-called Caucasians, there's only going to be a remnant of you that make it. Only a small amount. We'll get into that in further lessons. Only a small amount of you going to make it. That's it. Because you're going to stick to that wild olive tree. You're going to stick to the paganism. You're going to stick to that. And only a small amount of you are going to break off from that, your pagan ancestry, and going to come to the good olive tree. And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. So all Israel is going to be saved when it's all said and done. All 12 tribes, the elect from the 12 tribes of Israel, all 12 tribes are going to be saved. Because in the verse 1, the subject was, did God cast away His people? And the answer was no. So at the end of everything, the Gentiles being come into the fold, the fullness of the Gentiles be come in, at the end of the day, all 12 tribes of Israel are still going to be saved. So now we have a clear understanding on chronology of regarding the Gentiles. Now we know when, how, and why the Gentiles were grafted into the fold. Now we have a clear understanding, because a lot of you have been misinformed on this information. When this is something so basic, as long as you don't have a preconceived notion in the back of your mind and have an agenda, it's very easy to find out the Gentiles' position as far as the Most High and with the children of Israel. It's very easy to find that out. It's not rocket science. So a lot of you before, when explaining that Christ wasn't on the scene for the Gentiles, a lot of you are bringing me all the way up to the book of Romans and Galatians and Ephesians. That don't have anything to do with Christ. That's after Christ. Your chronology is incorrect. If you're telling me scriptures in Paul's letters or his epistles, then okay. But I'm talking about Christ, and you bringing me to Romans. That doesn't make any sense. That's not correct chronology. That's not chronologically correct. So now we have the proper understanding, and you have the proper timeline of the Gentiles. So hopefully everyone's been edified, and you've been taking notes, and you review the notes and go over the scriptures and read for yourself. It's not anything hard to find out. It's very simple, and it's very easy to be understood for those that have an ear. See, that's the thing. Many of you out there can read. Everyone can read. But does your spirit allow you to get the correct understanding? That's the problem. Or do you have an agenda in the back of your mind? See, but most of the Gentiles out there have an agenda. Their agenda is to get rid of God's people and to graft themselves in and put the children of Israel beneath them and put them above the children of Israel, so now they can become God's people. But that's not the way it works, which is on the next lesson. We're going to go into the Gentiles being cut off, because you're going to find out that the majority of the Gentiles are going to get cut off from being grafted in. So with that, hopefully the Most High has opened your spirit and giving you the ability to understand. So with that, until next time, I'm Brother Yerushalayim, and I say Shalom.